We had not parted on good terms less than 2 months earlier. A scene in his apartment had severely shaken me. When I arrived at the apartment, responding to Elaine's call to say that he was in a serious crisis, I found him not only drunk and high, but armed with two handguns, one holstered on each hip, and a dreadful looking semi-automatic rifle lying on the couch behind him. It was 10:30 in the morning. He was watching Taxi Driver. Oliver, what's going on? I asked, not sure how quickly or how directly I should ask him about the guns. What's happening? I had known for some time that he owned several guns and had been horrified by them. Having long ago left behind my adolescent flirtations with guns, few things could have been more foreign and threatening to me. Early on, I tried to be optimistic. His interest in guns and the satisfaction he derived from them were remarkably intense. You go on to talk about how Oliver wanted to go to the mall and take a bunch of people out, and how he was dropped from a methadone clinic. How do you feel about the recovery industry in this country?
Um, um, just getting a call I didn't expect there.
Sorry.
Um, yeah, in this respect too, my experience was like so many people,
Hmm.
beginning actually even before it got into the problem of guns, beginning with the OxyContin uh, disaster, where the Sackler family basically swindled the United States into allowing them to the medical community to oversaturate the whole culture with effectively opioid-like substances that became incredibly habit forming. And my son also got caught up in that. Actually, in the time that he died, now, as I say, about 17 years ago, Baltimore was pretty much the heroin capital of the country.
The Wire is done there, yeah.
It was amazing. I mean, so he was in the middle of a kind of a pressure cooker for this whole issue, and was sucked up, as many kids. There were a number of kids in his little circle who also became addicts, and at least two of them I know of died of overdoses. Anyway, it was in that sense really a kind of typical piece of where we are as a culture. But it was also in this gun business. I think when he began to feel really getting caught in the addiction,
Hmm.
I think he really was desperate to gain control. And
Hmm.
I think guns was a major way of making himself at least have a kind of a fantasy of being in control, of being empowered.
Hmm.
That's my guess. I never really discussed this that explicitly with him, but um, I think that was a large part of what was going on. And then, of course, at the end, he uses the gun
Hmm.
to get the ultimate little desperate, hopeless piece of control of killing himself.
Now, he was a father as well, and you talk about that in the book as well. Um, what was that like? Because he was pretty young. I think he was 19.
He was just actually, when Oliver died, he was just short of 23, but he was 19 when his son arrived.
Hmm.
Um, he and his common law wife, they actually never officially married,
Hmm.
but they had an abortion earlier, and
Ah,
um, of twins, as a matter of fact,
whoa.
which was incredibly painful to both of them.
Hmm.
Not because they had really a hard line idea or value around abortion or not, but rather just emotionally for the connection to these people who they would never know. And so when she became pregnant again, they just both of them refused the idea to abort it. And my grandson, who's now rounding up on 21, um, will be born. And he is, I have to say, with great joy, he's a fantastic kid. I love him. I was trading texts with him this morning about visiting him up in Pennsylvania, where he's now entering his junior year in college.
That's pretty awesome. As I'm a young parent as well, not 19, but 21 isn't too far off when we had our first child, my now ex-wife and I. Um, she's 25. Does it feel almost like a second life with the grandchild?
It does. The amount to which he reminds me of Oliver is uh, prevents it from being completely a second try, because I feel like I'm having this deja vu whenever I'm with him. He looks and acts and talks and has a kind of a, you know, creative, kind of offbeat spirit artistically and otherwise. It reminds me so much of his father that I sometimes have to pinch myself and remember that I haven't gone back in time. This
Hmm.
is a new generation, but I'm certainly, whenever I'm with Jack, Oliver's son, I feel incredibly happy to imagine how happy Oliver would be
Yeah.
that this really terrific kid is in the world. And I sometimes wonder, and I don't know the answer, how it will affect him. He, of course, for many years did not know the truth about his dad's death. He was 3.5 when Oliver killed himself. And that was a huge issue for his mom, who I have great respect for. She is herself a school counselor, so she knows
Oh,
a
okay.
bit about how to sort of deal with these kinds of challenges, but she didn't dare to tell him early on. And in fact, it waited until he was 12 that she finally said, you know, I've always told you that your dad died of a heart problem. In a certain sense, that was
Mhm.
true. Oliver was really brokenhearted about his own life, his own helplessness, his own feeling of failure. But she said the truth was that he was so desperately miserable and so hopeless that he shot himself to death. And one of the fascinating things was Jack, who at that point was 12, said, I know, Mom. I know that's what happened.
Really?
Well,
He, how do you find out?
amazingly, well, partly it's just because Jack is a really smart kid.
Yeah.
Um, but the other thing that's kind of interesting, I'd heard of it happening before, but this was, when it comes home to roost in my life,
Mhm.
he was actually in the next room in bed and semi asleep
Yes, you guys talk about that.
when
Mhm.
Oliver shot the bullet that killed him. And apparently, Oliver used a pillow. I talk about this very, very
To
briefly in
silence
the
it.
book to
Yeah.
silence the report of the bullet. So I think it was one of those situations where he knew he heard something, and he knew, of course, life totally changed after that. The next day, finding out his dad was dead. But it didn't register fully consciously, and I think it sort of drifted back, later on, and he kind of connected the dots. And then he was inwardly convinced that his father had killed himself. But this is an interesting part again about what a great kid this boy is. He effectively decided his mom can't tell him yet. She kind of can't handle it. So he, as a 10-year-old coming up on 12, for a couple of years there, he basically knew what happened, but he was sparing her having to tell him. So
Interesting.
when she said, your dad killed himself, and when he then said, I know, Mom, he wasn't exaggerating. Um,
Yeah, and reading that part of the book, I found that fascinating and almost magical in a sense because you're writing about it that your son tries to use a pillow, and there's only so much you're going to silence a gun going off. They're pretty loud and bright if you've ever heard guns go off in real life.
yeah,
So the fact that the kid slept through it, is a testament to him being worn out and being out like a light, and then the commotion of mom. Oh God, when you write about his mom finding him, that is beyond heartbreaking for anyone that's ever had to find uh, a person that's shot themselves or died of an OD. That's a heavy thing to find, and it definitely
yeah,
wears on you for some time because that becomes the image that you're stuck with. Um,
yeah, yeah. And of course, I I don't know how she's been able to manage it as well as she has, to tell you the truth. I think that she initially took the opposite course that I took. I dove into it,
Mhm.
rethinking it, re-experiencing it, looking at pictures of Oliver, kind of like trying to figure out what everybody tries to figure out, who's the loved one of someone who commits suicide. You kind of have to, you have this incredible urgency to know what was that about? Why did they do that? And how am I to interpret this? How am I to deal with it? And Anna, I think, took the opposite course. She said to herself, I need to worry about this little boy,
Mhm.
3.5-year-old little boy. I got to make sure he's okay. And I don't have the luxury, I think she felt, to think any more about what just happened. I have to kind of box it up and deal with it sometime down the road of my life, because I've just got to take care of Jack, which I totally understood. I mean, I respected her for being able to actually pull it off.